All right, we're starting a new assignment today, assignment 6. It's a Monday. It's a good time to check in with our course outline. So today is a work day on assignment 6, but next class we'll continue to work on assignment 6, but that is when it's due by midnight on Wednesday. But we will also be doing the first half of our student presentations next class. All you have to do is look under the presentation assignment, under assignments, to see where you're signed up for. So this is Wednesday's class. This will be a week from today on Monday. So assignment 6 is going to build on what we did for assignment 5. And so if I open up my master folder, and I'm hoping you guys are keeping your things as organized as you can, even if we're not finished with assignment 5, even if we just have our sketch, we can go to the next step for turning this into a poster, right? So whether you have your sketch or whether you have your finished final color, and I think my favorite finished color, which one was it? Maybe this one, or maybe this one. What's the difference between this one? It has a little bit more texture, so it's this one, right? So whatever your most finished spot illustration is, I want you to duplicate that to your desktop. So this is my most finished spot illustration. Yep, there we go. I want to duplicate that onto my desktop. How can I do that? You can hold down Option while you drag and drop it to your desktop. That will make a duplicate of it. And then you can start your assignment 6 folder. And bring it in, because we start with that. Now, if your most finished example is just your sketch, just do it with your sketch, because it will serve the same purpose, at least at the beginning of this project. So I'm done with assignment 5. Now I am in progress on assignment 6. So assignment 6, we only get a week to work on it, right? Due next class. But there is new and creative stuff we have to do. It's not as easy as it seems just to add text to an image and turn it into a poster. So we will see more details under Unit 12. We are learning the importance of type here. Now, type design is customizing the actual letters. And we're going to be doing that. And in order to do that, you have to, for the first time in this class, take 2 different elements that you design that speak to each other in a different way. You've done a landscape, and then you did a creature, and then you put the creature into the landscape, right? But the whole point of putting that creature into the landscape was to make them match. Their angle of the anatomy, the lighting, the overall believability of it. In type design, you are finding type that goes with your image, but it has a relationship with your image. It doesn't need to match. It doesn't need to harmonize, but it needs to be effective towards communicating what you want. So in this example, you start with the spot illustration, which is kind of a tattoo design, a little edgy. And then here's a little pun going with it. And because the pun is kind of upbeat, like the actual content of those words, good point. It's positive. It's like a stamp a teacher might put on a paper. And the image is so kind of edgy and dark and about death, to put them together is already contrasting enough, where they're playing off of each other, that the type design is actually made to fit the image. So that if you're doing a tattoo, and then you put text with the tattoo, that type design looks very tattooish. And it even takes its colors from the spot illustration. Does that make sense? So this is harmonizing the type design with the image, even though the personality of the text is different than the personality of the image. Here, the only spot illustration is this little puffy cloud, right? So this is very different, where this is all very type heavy, where the type design completely overtakes and surrounds the illustration. Here, the type design is exactly dead even with the illustration. You don't read one before the other. They're taking up the same amount of space. They're the same amount of focal point. Here, the type design wins out like 80-20 in our observation, right? So the type design is incredibly important. So the type design needs to have its own variation. Some type design that goes right with the cloud illustration or cell illustration, and then others that kind of give secondary reads. And there's even a tertiary read here, like a disclaimer, not responsible. Here we have very bold type design, two different approaches. And because the type design is so big and so bold, when it's combined with the image for the poster, the image actually obscures it, is put over the top. So you have to decode what it is. And because of the star on the hat, you can eventually understand that that's Texas, even though it's completely hidden. And then that goes to the humility idea. Like a big brash personality that is hiding itself. Here, the text design is very big and very visually interesting, but because it's done in a hand-done kind of brush script, it's pretty hard to read, pretty hard to decode. Right? Think of how different this is than this to read. So here the image is winning out. The image is winning out maybe like 70-30. I'm talking about percentages. You're going to notice that image first almost all the time, even though the text is really big and prominently placed. And that's because of the way it's stylized. So it is kind of first and second read. Here the text is title text. That's what you're going to see first. And then you have tertiary text underneath. So first read, second read, third read. And here, image first, but very balanced with the text. And because it's a decorative font, like a medieval font, it also becomes a little bit harder to read. So it slows you down. And it makes it a little bit more engaging. So, poster has three components that we're going to be making. Image, you've already made your image. It's your spot illustration. Text, that's what we have to design today. And then a background with a border, right? We're not going to worry about the background or the border yet. We're going to worry about the placement of the text and that text design. Stranger Things is a really good example of good text design. So it starts with just this standard Bingiat standard typeface. Typefaces are the design of the letters. Fonts are the variation on the typeface. So regular or standard or original, those are all fonts of Bingiat. But Bingiat is the typeface. Bold and italic would be fonts of Bingiat as well. So we often misuse that term font, but everyone does, except graphic designers. If you want to learn more about this and all of the thought that goes into type design, I recommend this site. It's Art of the Title. It's all about the type design and motion graphics for different projects. This is just the one about Stranger Things, but it will show you their test. It will show you their inspirations, like Stephen King novels and horror novels from the 1980s, and the ways that they try to make their solution non-normative, right? And they do that with the placement of the letters. And we're going to talk about that. That's something called kerning. So this is the standard font that they started with, but their end design modifies it by squeezing the space between the letters until it's super uncomfortable. So much so that the nice curve of the G's gets totally flattened into the ends. And then they do some other things with lighting and color and texture to make it even more unsettling. So that's the type designer. Then you have the illustrator that makes the image, and they have to make an image that supports whatever that type design is. So these always work together. If you're a typographer, you design type. That's your main job. But most of the time with marketing, with digital imaging, with digital media, you are in charge of organizing images and type together. So this is a friend of mine I went to school with. This is Akiko, who's made a very good career doing independent movie posters. And Akiko would always, for the first 20 years of her career, do kind of independent movie posters, sometimes of really well-known movies, sometimes of really small independent releases, and would design everything about the poster. So we would design the illustration, would design the type, and notice how the different styles of illustration and text really vary based on the poster. Akiko has won several awards, like the Clio Awards is a big advertising award. It's really, really cool to see her influence in the industry grow. And with that influence, she's gotten to do higher and higher profile jobs, like Dune, right? And doing the Dune poster, this was Dune Part 2, she didn't get to design the type, right? So she's designing an image that will work with the type. And what's interesting is when she doesn't do her own type design, she's very often going to be almost antagonistic with it. So here's her doing the type design for Oppenheimer. She's done a lot of Oscar winners for American fiction. And sometimes it needs to be really, really straightforward. But when it's posters like this for The Last of Us, that type is already given to her. And notice how she's kind of working against it with the image, because her job is to get people to pay attention to the image. And so to do that, she infects the type with the disease, the zombie kind of fungus of The Last of Us. On and on and on. Here, it's all about this visual joke. This is for a movie that was also a big Oscar contender this year, The Substance, playing with an old optical illusion. And if you know the movies, you'll realize how brilliant, or the TV series, how brilliant these approaches are. And they're each completely individualized, right, for the character of that movie. So there is no distinct difference between the type and the image, right? So we want to be able to understand both of them. Bum, 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 bum. Another artist we've seen before in the class when we talk about appropriation, Shepard Fairey. Shepard Fairey has consistently used type and done poster design for kind of the street art, the activist art, the promotional art. Sometimes it's more decorative and more historical. Sometimes it's really, really straightforward. Sometimes it's referencing other things. So this Obey, which was one of his 1990s first campaigns, this is based on the graphic design work of Barbara Kruger, who's most famous for, she's done a lot, she's still doing a lot, a feminist activist artist and graphic designer for this piece. And this is just Helvetica, italicized, white on red, and then hand spaced. So the typesetting is custom. Starting in the 80s, this became kind of synonymous with activist art. So you see it used time and again. We see it used by Shepard Fairey here. And then kind of most ironically, we saw it used in this century with the very expensive Supreme clothing brand, right? Which all Supreme really does is take other people's designs, clothing designs, pattern designs, and then brands it with their own logo type. But that logo type, they've admitted this, is just taken right from Barbara Kruger, right? So everything derivative. Why? Because it gives you that kind of activist credibility, right? Even though I don't think Supreme gives a lot of money to activist causes or urban renewal or anything like that. So type treatment matters. Here they're appropriating Keith Haring. Yeah, it's a little aggravating to me, but it works, right? The personality of the type carries it forward. So how do we do this? We are